People keep asking me over and over and over again, when did you change? But I didn't. I just stopped confusing burning with loving. For years, I thought that the measure of love was how much of yourself you were willing to lose. I thought that commitment meant compromise. Then compromise becomes concession, and then concession becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice becomes survival. And somewhere between I'll understand and I'll be okay, I disappeared. You see, they feel and they would tell us all the time that love is supposed to be warm. And nobody warns us that warmth and fire are not the same thing. You see, a fireplace welcomes you home. A wildfire doesn't know the difference between weeds and forests. And one gives life and the other one leaves lessons that are written in ash. And I spent years setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. And they thanked me for my glow. And nobody asked what it cost to keep burning. Nobody asked how much of me had already turned to smoke, because people always admire light until they realize that light has a source. You see, it's funny because the same people who called me amazing never noticed that I was disappearing. Maybe they did. And maybe it was just easier to compliment the flame than to acknowledge that the person is becoming the fuel. See, some people, they don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with your availability, your forgiveness, your flexibility, your willingness, all of those things. And it keeps saying, it's okay, when your soul is really screaming, no, it's not. That's not love. That's emotional outsourcing. I know, because I had a PhD in overgiving. I had a minor in overthinking, and I graduated from the University of Maybe They'll Change. And the tuition, it was pieces of myself. And women, we've been praised for pouring, pouring, and pouring. We pour into our husbands, we pour into our significant others, we pour into our children, we pour into our families, we pour into our churches, we pour into our jobs, we pour into our community. Just pour and pour and pour. And nobody asks who's pouring into you, until one day you pick up your own cup and you discover that you're thirsty. And then I've tried and I've watched you two men taught that strength is measured by what you refuse to feel, that tears are weakness, that silence is maturity, that carrying everything alone is somehow honorable. So you become a furnace, hot enough to melt steel, too afraid to warm a heart. And imagine that. A man who can rebuild an engine but has never been taught how to rebuild his own heartbreak. We've all been handed broken definitions. Some of us mistook endurance for intimacy, possession for protection, jealousy for passion, control for commitment, loneliness for loyalty. Wordplay is funny as a poet. But in real life, we say, I'm invested. No, sometimes you're just overdrawn. And, we say, I'm holding on. And sometimes you're just holding the entire relationship by yourself. And we say, I don't want to let go. Maybe it's because your hands have forgotten what freedom feels like. Here's what healing has taught me. A candle was never meant to complete the sun. A candle shrinks every time it gives light. The sun loses nothing by rising. Let's think about that again. A candle shrinks every time it gives light, but the sun loses nothing by rising. I thought love meant becoming a candle. Now, I want to love like the sunrise, still warm, still generous, still life-giving, but never disappearing just to prove that I exist. You see, water taught me this, what fire never could. A river never argues with the stone. It simply keeps moving. It never asks permission to flow. It never apologizes for change in direction. And it never mistakes an obstacle for a destination. And maybe that's us. Maybe healing isn't becoming someone else. Maybe it's finally becoming someone who is no longer making mistakes, or burning a thought for belonging. You see, some people will call you cold because you stop setting yourself on fire just to keep them warm. And they've confused your boundaries with winter. And they simply haven't learned the temperature of healthy love. Healthy love doesn't scorch, it shelters. Healthy love doesn't consume, it cultivates. Healthy love does not ask, what can I take? It asks, how do we grow? So if you've been wondering whether you're too much, too loud, too emotional, too independent, too soft, too strong, maybe you've simply been standing in rooms that only knew how to appreciate fire. Go where they understand sunlight. Go where warmth doesn't require wounds. Go where heart doesn't have to audition for acceptance, because the greatest triumph isn't finding someone who loves you. It's becoming someone who refuses to abandon themselves in the name of love. And one day you'll hear their name without your heartbeat asking permission to be okay. You'll remember without reopening. You'll forgive without returning. You'll love again. And you'll be ever, forever without losing yourself. But not because the fire disappeared, but because you finally learned the difference between something that keeps you warm and something that burns your whole life down. And that may be the most beautiful love story that you'll ever write. Because this time, the person that you finally saved was yourself.